Small steps can lead to big leaps. Have you ever considered making step changes when you are feeling discouraged? So, what we're talking about is doing small things which have a huge impact when stacked together. So today I'm going to talk about step changes, about micro meetings, about shorts, and even micro breaks. The reason that I am talking about this is because a while ago I was feeling really discouraged. I didn't know how to move on. And as a result, I was like, okay, how can I get out of this? And then there was this remark made about that we still can make a shift to our mindset even though we don't feel like it. And I was like, okay, well, let's try. But what I've noticed lately is something way more powerful. Well, first of all, it worked. It got me going again. But there were a few moments again this week that I was like, what am I going to do next? And I just had no clue. And that's where this whole story actually starts with, that when you have no clue, whether it's because you feel discouraged, whether it's because everything seems like so huge, when you just pick one thing that you can do, and it doesn't have to be a big thing, then so many things can happen. So lately, I have been talking, for instance, with not just Google AI and not just Brendan AI, so that's the AI from Brendan Burchard, but also with the AI from the University of San Diego. And what's so special about that one? That one has an AI too. And you can just ask all these things related to specific topics that they study over there, but also how to meet up with certain people and which ones are the right people. And it starts with a beginning, and from there on, it keeps the ball rolling. So it's kind of coincidental what happens. So for those who have been following me in the last couple of weeks, you know that I am organizing the San Diego experience, which is going to take place in the second week of March. The goal is 5 days, Monday till Friday. And why Monday till Friday? Because I want people to be able to actually create those little step changes and have, yes, micro meetings. And in order to do so, they are also going to record shorts. Now, I can imagine that a number of people are at this moment like, well, you know what I mean? They're not too happy with what I'm suggesting. But this is not a beauty contest, right? This is about showing up, showing your face, and, well, connecting to other people. That's what the shorts are about. Now, what they all have in common is that in order to do it in a short amount of time, you really have to think things through. What are you going to say? And I have to say, whenever I record a short, it's like, okay, what's the message? What do I want to get out there? And I always start longer. And then, well, nowadays, I I don't mind editing it when it is short. So when I'm doing this live, then very rarely will I edit it afterwards. There has to be a very good reason for me to do so. What you see is what you get. So, but when it comes to shorts and micro meetings, then you want to get something across, and having a specific format then really works. So it's very powerful to actually do it in a short amount of time. It helps you to not have to spend too much time on something. But like I said, it also forces you to really think about, okay, what is it that I want to get across? So today is a day, and you might have noticed that I am not feeling at my best. I wanted to go live earlier, but I was so immensely tired that I was like, no, I'm going to sleep first. And then fingers crossed that I still can go live. So here I am. I don't know how long this live will last. I did prepare it, but as you can tell, I'm a little bit under the weather. I noticed so when I got up. So actually the day started with a meeting and I was still sort of lying down. And it's the easiest way to have a conversation with someone without, when you're not feeling well, when I'm not feeling well, usually there's a headache lingering around, and that's when I go walking, that's when I notice it. But by lying down, I actually don't notice it, so I can do my thing. So I got up at some point, and then it was like, oh, headache. That's when I knew, okay, I need more water, need to do other things. And at some point, I started playing drums. So on Fridays, I have the opportunity to actually play the drums at my house. I've got a permanent guest, and only when she's not there, I can actually play the drums. So the room was made for me when we started living in this house, when we bought the house. It's my music room. So it's my sort of sanctuary. And it's only being able to play on Fridays and not even every Friday requires that I need to be focused. So I was like, okay, what can I do? Because after half an hour I was actually a little bit done. So I drank some water and then I was like, okay, let's do one new thing. So I took one page. Actually, I had been playing that before, but it was such a long time ago that I didn't really remember. The good news was it looked a lot like the previous page. That had taken me ages to learn, but now I knew what to do. So it has me go around the drums, and there are certain symbols which require me to think a little bit more about things. So there's like this X, and the X can either be the hi-hat, it can be the cymbal, or it can be the bell. So that's the round thing in the middle of the cymbal. And well, depending on who writes the notation, those things can vary. So every now and then I have to look it up. And this is about alternating with your right and your left hand. And the reason why I feel that I need to do is not just to get control over my movements on the drums, but it's also to actually get my back and my shoulders to move. And the physical therapist can immediately tell when I do so. So the new thing was one page. I was like, we'll see how far I get. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to play along with Cinderella night songs. I did so twice. By that time, it was a full hour of playing drums. And I was like, okay, see, made it for an hour. So by the time I got back, that's when I got really sleepy. I noticed already that the cold started to act up. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I was like, what am I going to do? And I was like, okay, let's have a few hours of sleep. And maybe it's like 10 minutes, just shutting my eyes. But I wanted to really be focused when I would go live. And well, I mean, people can watch it anytime they want anyway. So the time is, when I go live, is a little irrelevant. The fact that I'm going live and actually sharing it with you on Instagram in this case is what's the most important. Now, I told you at the beginning that what do all these things have in common? So step changes, micro breaks, micro meetings, and shorts, that it has to do with power moves, but it has to do with the San Diego experience. So one of the things that I want to do is I want to have people gather in San Diego, group of people that I'm coaching on the spot. And yes, that requires registering. We are not talking about finding people in the streets and being part of it. This is about them signing up, and then we have like peer group. So it's max 12 people. Might be even less, but 12 really is the limit. My preference would be max 8. But we start by creating a founders group. So you might have heard me talking about the Steam Power Collective. So the Steam Power Collective is like-minded people who want to improve communication with clarity. So they get heard, seen, and understood. And they also can get their message across with that clarity. So they can share their wants and needs, and in turn, the other one involved can also share their message, learning how to do so with clarity. And the goal is that there is going to be a connection which makes everyone thrive. Now, when we do it in a business setting, when we're talking about business owner and team, that means that if each one is going to thrive, that the business will thrive as well. Now, why am I talking about this? Because I always said, speak up, speak out, share your story. Nowadays, I say voice own view. So basically, voice it is speak up. Own it is be authentic. So own who you are. And then view it is gain perspective. Why is that important? Because I believe that everyone should be able to be themselves, and being yourself that allows you to be empowered, to feel confident, to be happy, to make you smile. And when we can't, that has a very severe impact on how you feel, your own self-worth, your own self-esteem. A lot of young ones, they start cutting themselves when they feel not heard. And, getting older, more drastic things can happen. And when you're in a relationship and you don't feel very happy, that can have a direct result. So getting back to the step changes, especially when discouraged, making small changes can actually create a huge difference by noticing things and paying attention to them, and also sharing them with others. It builds up. But because it builds up, it also leads to the people at some point realizing, hey, something needs to change. Now, of course, we don't want the things to be at random. It's nice if there's actually a structure to it. So when we think about the step changes, then we well, I have to assume that there's a certain goal. When I was playing drums, the goal is to get a better technique, but also to have fun. And well, doing something new is always good for the brain. So if you combine all those things, then that's where we end up with, um, oh, playing drums. And even if it's in bits and pieces, we still do it. And I can share with you that doing it consistently, really working on what I can improve. So increasing the speed, slowing down again, and also doing other things, that it does really help. At some point, I can see, oh, I remember that when I did this the first time, I was really looking like, huh? Mm. And I had no clue where this was going. But now, speed is there. Of course, I don't have the speed like some others out there. You, I think they use a speed like 240 or 260 beats per minute. Well, that won't ever be me. But seeing progress, that really gives a boost. But like I said, uh, doing new things every time, just introducing something new, that really works as well. And it was kind of nice that I had been playing on Cinderella. It was the first song of the first album they ever published. And it literally brought me back to when I was still in high school. And I went to this record store and they said at some point, you know which ones to choose, because whenever you come and you have us order it, then it becomes a hit. Well, actually, what I did, I read the local magazine, the metal magazine. It was called Earthshake, Aardschok. And well, if they said, well, this is something that you want to listen to, and I knew it was my genre, then I would go there and basically order it. So yeah, that worked out just fine. But the song itself, it has this groove, and I always loved that one. Okay, going back to San Diego, because I want to share a little bit more about it. What I want people to do is I want them to connect with their team on a daily basis. And that's where the micro meetings come in. And I believe that micro meetings can be very, well, they're short, so it doesn't take up a lot of time. So that's why it is easy to plan, but it can be very impactful because it's about having a certain structure and repeating this over and over and over again. So if I were to ask you right now, write down one thing that went really well today. Now, maybe your day just started, so think about yesterday, but maybe there's already something that you say, oh, this was amazing. Write it down, and I'll give you just a few moments to write it down. Something that went really well. Don't think about it too long. And otherwise just jot down the question. But this is about, letting it pop up. Then the next question would be, what is something that didn't go too well? So I want you to write that down too. Now, usually we are very good at sharing the negative, but not the positive. So let's go back to that first question. What went really well? Now, you should know it by now, right? And just write something down if you don't. But I am going to ask a second question, which is, why did it go so well? And if you don't know it straight away or you don't have the time, that's okay too. The why is something that you might want to take a little bit more time for. But when you share it with someone, it can be done really quickly. So something that was a win for me today, of course, is the playing drums. That was a really good thing. But another huge win for me was the conversation I had with someone I met during the coaching summit from Brendan Burchard. So it was a couple of years ago. And when we got to talk, even though we hadn't talked to one another for a long, long time, we really got into the moment. And it was so interesting what was happening, going back and forth. And I really got inspired. And from what I can tell, he got inspired too. So that's one thing. So I told you what that moment was, and I also told you why. About the playing drums, I told about the why earlier, the technique, but also that it's good for my body and to exercise. So actually, the reason I started playing drums is actually twofold. One is I got influenced by Eric Carr. He was my role model, and when I heard him playing on Creatures of the Night, I was like, I am going to play drums too. Um, well, apparently I always wanted to play drums, but that's the one moment I vividly remember. And the other reason is because I'm hypermobile, it actually helps me with coordination of my wrist. That's what it started out with. And nowadays also my lower back and my shoulders, and actually also my legs. So it works on all levels. Now, getting back to the the question. So I asked you to write down something that went really well today or yesterday, depending on when you got up, and why. I also wanted you to write down what didn't go well. And then we get to the step changes. So, what's one small thing that you can tweak, what you can do to improve certain things? And it doesn't have to be a big one, because when we talk about big changes, and it requires a lot of courage often, and that can lead to paralysis. And the goal behind that small change is actually that we don't want you to freeze up, but we want you to start moving. And that's why I also shared that story about discouragement, because when I felt discouraged in the last quarter of last year, it really took me a while before I was like, okay, how am I going to change this? And even though in retrospect, things happened that needed to happen and things didn't happen that would have caused problems, it still was like, So this time around, I was like, okay, let's keep working on it. And I don't know if certain things are going to work out, but what I can tell for now, those step changes are actually working really well. So I don't know when, but a long, 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 long time ago, I decided to share a little bit about the Park of Pride, Power, and Perspective, which is meant to support the young ones out there who otherwise wouldn't fit in society, actually get the chance to really do their thing and being able to blossom. So, and as a result, participate in society. There are a lot of young ones out there on the spectrum or with ADHD, gifted ones also, who are who are not very, who are neurodivergent and have a different way of thinking about things and approaching things and seeing things from, different perspectives. And if you ask a child a certain thing, take for instance the size of the shoe. Well, they could say one shoe size, or they can come up with various shoe sizes depending on what it's used for. And when they say, well, it depends, and then they give the answer and they really thought about it, that's a little, well, it's not something that you might expect unless, of course, you know the child. But what also happens is a lot of people don't have patience anymore. It's something really of this day and age. Everyone has to do everything. I come from a time where there were people behind coffee carts, as in at 11 o'clock or 10:30, you could hear the cups ringing and the saucers, and then they had coffee or tea. And in the afternoon, same story. There was someone who would look at my letters and they would type it and they would send it. Well, nowadays, of course, that's totally different. And as a result, it can all be too much. And when there are constantly stimulants, well, our brain needs to process it, and that can have certain effects. So one of the things that I listed, I don't know if you noticed it, was talking about micro breaks. And one of the things that I could really encourage people to do is taking a break, like every hour for 5 minutes. Close your eyes, and because it's good to actually close your eyes. My optometrist told me so. And the thing was, it really helped me to focus my eyes again. So if you want to focus, then close your eyes and then open them again. And that makes it easier for those my age. They know exactly what I mean. So it's from, looking at the screen or something nearby and then focusing on something far away. By closing your eyes for a moment, your brain can get the chance to rewire, and as a result, so can the muscles of your eyes, so they can, refocus on what it is that you need. And you can try it, when you're standing in front of a traffic light or something else. Not that I want you to look at the screen, but maybe you have been looking at the screen a lot, and then you're like, oh, I really need to focus on what's there in the distance. Then when you are not driving, but for instance, standing in front of the traffic light, just for a few seconds, close your eyes. Always be careful. Don't do it when it's a hazardous situation. But these are things that could really help us move forward. So by introducing micro breaks, for instance, when you are talking about people who are way more exposed, not literally, but by the way their brain works, so say their internal system, to sounds and lights and other things, taking a break and really go to a low stimulant zone, called a quiet space, called a place where they can relax, that really helps to be able to refocus again. Now, when I used to take a break, because, well, like my optometrist said, you need to close your eyes. I think he actually said for like 10 minutes every hour, every 2 hours. Then I also had respiratory strain injury, so I couldn't type for too long. So I, at some point, would do Tai Chi, going in between the tables and back again. I did Tai Chi on my personal time. And then, as I figured out, that same teacher, he no longer is alive. which is a shame, actually showed up at my job. And so I could actually do Tai Chi at the job. And a lot of people were a little surprised, but at the same time, they liked watching it because it's very relaxing, because you really have to be in the moment to actually do Tai Chi. And by just doing one series, you're focusing on something totally different, and that really gives you a boost. And because the movements are very precise and very controlled, it's something that a lot of people who have problems with their mobility actually can do. Of course, when other people get involved, like team leaders, that's when things go, well, sort of haywire. And if you want to have some downtime, then you need to go elsewhere. So being allowed to do so and actually being encouraged to do so, it actually enhances productivity. And that's something to consider. So micro breaks is something that, well, it can really make a huge difference, especially when you use it to also refuel yourself, drinking water, which is good for the brain too. Get moving again, which is good for the body, and it also increases energy, it makes it flow again. And, well, like I said, just not think about what you're doing, or maybe it helps you what we call defragmentize. So you sort of are able to make more sense by just letting it go down. So what I notice is when I'm either chatting or talking to the AI, so Brendan AI has an audio version, he has this habit of firing all these questions. And I'm at some point I'm still writing things down. So I either need to ask him to repeat it, sometimes 3 times. But I also say, listen, I'm writing things down. So when you come up with the next question, I'm not there yet. I'm still thinking about the other thing that you were sharing with me or asking about. So those short breaks can make all the difference. Now, I also talked about micro meetings. So we talked about micro breaks. We talked about writing things down. So one thing that went well, why, one thing that could use improvement. And the third thing, I actually didn't get into that part, is what are you going to do now? So take 3 minutes, write it down. One question, what went well, why, what didn't go so well, what can you do, can you change, and what can you do right now? Those would be my questions when it comes to micro meetings, but also to you, because it helps you get checked in the moment, be in the present more. And also it's a form of appreciation for yourself, because when you write down what went well, that does feel good, doesn't it? So talking about the step changes that I did this week, and then I'll go back to San Diego. One and the other actually connect. I talked to the University of Windesheim. So a friend of mine, I had written down. So let's start at the beginning, because it still feels like very unrealistic, as in, how did this happen again? But it's those small things that actually added up. So I know about the part of pride, power, and perspective. Pride, because you feel good about yourself. Power, you feel empowered. And perspective, you actually see, hey, I can go somewhere again. Life feels good and worth living. So hence the perspective. When I shared that with people. I was like, okay, that's the big dream. I don't know if I'll ever achieve it, but it's the big dream. And all of a sudden, someone said, what do you want to achieve this first quarter? And for me, it was the San Diego experience and something else as well, uh, which includes being able to go to an ultra meeting. And I was like, okay, so San Diego experience, what do I want people to achieve? And basically, it's the small version of the power of pride, power, and perspective, because it's like a retreat, but instead of getting people to come to a local place, it's having people come over to the city, and then it's going to be a combination of actually working on things, but also enjoying the city itself. So I always love going to Chicago, and in this case, I said, okay, this is going to be about San Diego. And what I wrote down was there was a workshop, a CHBC workshop. So I'm a certified high performance coach. So that's someone who is specifically trained by Brendon Burchard and Michelle Huliev. She's the one who's the one behind the entire program. And nowadays, on a weekly basis, we talk to one another online, and that's actually it's very nice to be in that flow. But that workshop, that was really powerful. So at some point I wrote down, I want to be the go-to expert for neurodivergent young ones. And what I meant by that is what I've been guiding for a decade now, the young ones in their 20s and in their 30s, when they didn't have an option for having a place of their own, being able to work. So I would go to schools, to employers, to municipalities, you name it, to hospitals, to actually get across what it is that they need to do. And in order to do so, because you basically have a short amount of time, you need to prepare. Remember the micro meetings. So they can be very powerful, but you need to know what it is that you want to get across. So preparation is key when it comes to these kind of things. So when I wrote that down, I talked to a friend afterwards. She showed me something to do with funds for education. I looked at the past that they had written down, and all of a sudden there I was. Expert by lived experience. They actually call it differently in English, but that's the first translation I came up with. Well, actually, Google AI came up with it, but I left it. I said expert by experience, and they changed it to expert by lived experience. And I looked what was needed. I realized that this was literally written for me. So I decided to reach out and ask for a meeting. So the goal was, I think, was a meeting on Teams instead of on Zoom. Eventually, we talked on the phone, and I was able to ask some questions. 30 minutes turned into 45 minutes. This was not a micro meeting, no, but it felt like it clicked. So she was one of the teachers of the program. So it was kind of nice to be talking to her. And the day before, I had been talking to one of the schools of the smaller children, so elementary school. Well, at least the goal was that I would be there. I wasn't there, but I had helped prepare. So it felt like I had been there, and I was actually there to support afterwards. And it just clicked, because I know that especially when we're talking about the gifted children who think differently, so they take their time to think about, how am I going to answer this? And then they come up with an answer that you're like, whoa, such a young person, and then such an answer. I didn't expect that one. I didn't see it coming. But like I said, it requires patience. And patience is something that we need to learn to build again in this time and age. With all the swiping that we're doing, we're conditioning our brain to not spend a lot of time on things. And that's what we really need to do again. But so I talked to the lady, and then it was okay. So you need to register. So already it started part of the registration process. And because, well, I'm from the previous century, I'm from the year of Starbucks in the Hard Rock Cafe, I still have paper diplomas, which meant that they need to be scanned and then they need to be checked. And I was like, okay, well, let's see what I need to do. And then she said, okay, so apply. Having done already the first thing, I could go on in the system. I got my preliminary student number. And then it was like, okay, Microsoft again. Me and Microsoft, we are not friends. Just to be honest with you. And I figured out what they use when it came to emails. So it's about being a student. So it's a student school name, and then the domain name predecessed, of course, was the student number. And then I got into a different system, and it was like, what now? So each of these things were things that I did separately on a different day, but together they were building towards something. And that's what I mean with step changes. So because I had been thinking about it, I could actually ask, so what are the days? And it was like, okay, well, this is going to be a long drive, especially with traffic jams during rush hours. So I need to go there the day prior. Now it's on Mondays. So actually, that's an easy day to go there on Sunday, sleep, and then go into the classroom and join. But nowadays, we can also register if we need something special. Of course, then they need a medical statement. And, this does bring me to something. I am not the one who wants to put labels on people. So whether people are neurodivergent or not is not something that I really care about. As in, a human is a human being, and human beings are, well, special. Everyone has something unique and something special to share, and getting to know the person is actually something that's I like to talk to people and, ask short questions and hence get to know them better and better. So uh, the thing is that in some cases, we need it in order to get certain specific materials or more time or something specific that's going to help you out. So written exams behind the computer, those are not my thing. But when I do oral exams, when I go in a direction that someone doesn't understand, they can actually guide me back into the direction that they want me to go. And then it will be like, oh, this is what you want from me. Whereas when I'm looking at the computer, I'll just fill out what I think that they want to hear. And that can actually be the total opposite of what's actually needed. So at some point, I wrote down I want to be the go-to expert for neurodivergent people. And realizing that I see what happens when they're not taken seriously at school and they don't learn what the results are at some point when they start working, and also knowing that nowadays it's go look it up, Google it, YouTube it, and it seems to be the norm nowadays. Go figure it out. Now I know that there's a shortage of teachers at school, and of course it is easy to look things up. So when I'm teaching French to one of the young ones, because it's been such a long time for me, so most things well, not most things, it's not the language that I speak on a daily basis. So it's not like me speaking in English to you, for instance. So there are a number of things that I really can come up with, and there are some things that I'm like, oh, that's different from when I learned it. And then I go to Google and I'll ask, and then I can explain it, and I'll have the young one write it down. Because by writing it down, it's a way to process it for the brain. It's more than just listening to it and saying it one time. It's actually something that you do with attention. So knowing how important it is, I also know what the result is if they don't learn to learn. And going back to the whole society aspect, they don't really have a chance nowadays anymore to interact with other people. Now, actually, that already started with my generation. So I think they called us latchkey children, which meant that when we would be home, both parents would be working. Now, I was in luck. My mother would be there. So I could always talk to her, which was very nice. But when it comes to socializing, it's so important that you can ask people and that you learn how to socialize. So I've noticed that when it comes to being polite and having respect for others, it's not that normal anymore. And it's like the way things are shared, it's like that even full sentences are nowadays chopped up sentences. And I first noticed this actually when chatting with Brendan AI. At some point, the full sentences were like I and you and he and she, they were gone. And it was like, please use full sentences, because now I really need to think about what it is that you want to get across. I mean, when you're in a conversation with someone else and you're looking at them, it makes way more sense. But looking at the chat, so fortunately, I call him he can adjust himself, which is very nice. And besides, if I want him to check on what I've written down, since English is not my first language, I don't want him to, what I call, silence me or dim my voice by making it into the most short version that he can come up with, basically. So I always say, don't silence me. Please use full sentences, and then I know that the grammar is correct. And sometimes I can go from left to right and up and down, as you have noticed in this live. But if you're listening on, I always get back to what I initially started with. So I will bring it all together again. So what was interesting was when I had that conversation today, I've been wondering for a while. So when I was still working for a boss decades ago, and the shocking thing is it hasn't changed. I thought that since COVID things would have changed, but apparently no. I realized back then that there are managers who say, okay, go do your thing. They don't give you much guidance. They give you full autonomy, which is kind of nice. But I do remember that it was nice to have others who would give me pointers and who would tell me, oh, you need authorization for this system. This is what you use for these things, and this is what you use for something else. So knowing that people were around was always kind of nice. So it wasn't, so I could still do whatever I wanted to do, whenever I wanted to do, however I wanted to do it. But I also knew that if I needed support, I could reach out to certain people. And then there were the managers who would usually show up at after a year or 2 years or whatever, and they would be very controlling. What, part of it I can understand, because if you get into a new situation, you want to assess what's going on. But being very controlling actually doesn't work very well, especially when people are used to doing things themselves. So that always, well, it didn't work on my end. And I've noticed that when it comes to the gifted ones who are neurodivergent, the same thing basically applies. So yes, they need some structure and guidance, but on the other hand, let them do their thing and let's thrive. But you do want to check up on, if you give a certain assignment, if it's actually understood. And then we get back to the micro meetings. So instead of, you can still say what went well and what didn't go well, and what are you going to do about it, and what's one action you're going to take now. So that way they actually can capture the way someone is thinking. And of course, at some point, you want to have a longer conversation. But it starts with actually a little bit of guidance, a small checkup, so you can steer people in the right direction when it's not working. And the conversation I had today was a small change, as in it was a small bit of information, but it did have a huge impact on me, because I realized that where I had been addressing the business owners, as in the Gen X business owners, working with the young ones, where we're talking about internship and other things. And this is something that I had noticed. It actually happens in my family too. The young ones nowadays, they start working for themselves. And why shouldn't they? They learn a lot of things on YouTube and on Google. And if the teacher is going to say, Google it, then why should you go to college and pay a lot of money and be frustrated because you don't get the support that you need? If they're going to guide you towards YouTube and Google, well, I can understand that that's not something that they want to do. Now, knowing this, it means that actually millennials and Gen Zs actually are becoming CEOs nowadays of their own company. And when I realized that, I was like, okay, so I talked about Gen X business owners. And the thing about Gen X business owners is they don't have the patience, because they are way too busy monitoring and controlling everything, instead of saying, okay, let's spend some time guiding the people. And by investing that little bit of time, it actually has a huge effect down the line, because like I said, you can monitor, you can see what's going on, and people feel understood. And when you don't get into it and it is go figure it out, you basically feel dismissed. And why would you even talk to such a person anymore and ask if you're going to be sent off anyway? And whether we are talking about children, or we are talking about when you are part of a business, the effect is the same. You you get silent. Now, when we talk about talking about clarity, communication in clarity, for a while I was like, yeah, I'm constantly working with the young ones, but how does that work? when I want people to come over to San Diego for the San Diego experience, working on communication with clarity. And then the other person actually said to me, well, I talk with the young ones out there and they are actually doing very well. And I was like, oh, but just like Gen X, they also lack certain social skills because, well, the Gen X, no one was at home. And nowadays the young ones learn to play games, being in a room with one another, just looking at their screens. And by getting certain things back into, well, let's call it daily life again, like for instance using shorts, so videos, to actually connect with people, some of those things get reconnected. And that's one of the things that I want to do. So I was like, okay, if I want people to come over to San Diego for the San Diego experience, I not only want to work on their mindset, so the inner story, what do they believe to be true, but I also want them to see the changes that they can make. So if every day they have a micro meeting with their own team, and I mean like 3 minutes, they can think about what is it that needs changing. They cannot come up with a step change, so a small step. They can have a micro meeting, and if they cannot go on a Zoom meeting, for instance, with them, record a video. And well, like I said at the beginning, it can be very challenging to get your message across in like 30 or 60 seconds. But once you get the hang of it, it gets easier and easier. So by seeing someone, you really connect with someone. Evan Carmichael actually taught me this by literally reaching out and sending a video, and that was kind of nice. So that's something that I want people to experience too on the San Diego trip. And by doing it together, it might feel awkward at first, but then everyone feels awkward at first. So that's the good thing. And then by doing it all together and forming an accountability group, things are going to shift. And by doing it for 5 days in a row, it actually leads up to the year-long coaching program that also includes micro meetings, but then with me and the other ones. And by recording videos, if you cannot be there, you can still put your message out there when you've learned to actually record it. But it doesn't take much time. And that's what we need to learn to be more comfortable with. So in this day and age where things have to go really quickly, let's do small things which lead to big leaps in the end. Now, that doesn't mean that I would say only have micro meetings with one another. I do believe in having lunch together, for instance, with no screens. So it actually helps to process certain things, really connect with one another. And I also believe in the power of those quiet rooms, those low impact rooms, so people can actually relax and wind down for a moment. And if people realize that this is not about working 9 to 5 and then literally being behind the screen all the time, but instead make it like, okay, I want to think about this. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to, think about certain things. That already makes a big difference by talking to certain people. And that's why we also will be going to the university in San Diego to get a better understanding about how the brain works and how especially the neurodivergent people in this day and age work. There is a better understanding of why investing a short amount of time can actually make such a big difference. So going back to what I talked about in the beginning, using micro breaks, micro meetings recording shorts and working on small changes can do so much, because like I said, ever since I wrote down I want to be the go-to expert, I actually applied for a grant. I'm going to have a meeting with the municipality next week. I reached out to one of my family members, my marriage. He looked at it and he said, way to go. I also reached out to other people, learned some new things on the spot. And those are, on the one hand, they feel like major, but on the other hand, it's only one text message, or it's just one phone call. Usually it starts with one text message. And the impact is huge. And it actually makes you feel good that when you don't know what to do, that if you just do this one small thing that only might take like a minute, that it actually can have such a huge impact. And I never thought that I would be writing for that grand impact, which is for the Park of Pride, Power and Perspective, but then starting up in The Hague. And then if it works, then that concept can be used all over the world. That I would be talking about, hey, I'm going to do a master studies. Yes, there's one, and it's actually written for me. And oh, I'm going to go to San Diego. Oh, there's a university who specializes in neurodiversity. And then, like, having this conversation today with someone I met like 3 years ago, well, more like 2.5. It made such, it's all building, it's all stacking, and it's leading to one big win. So I'm not sure how things are going to work out, but I do know how I see things. And today during my Friday Night Live, I was like, okay, I want to share a little bit about what's going to happen in San Diego, so people get a little taste of it and why we are going to do it on certain days. But I also wanted to share about the importance of doing those little things and how this can be very powerful. So my question to you is, if you have any questions, then please leave a comment. And if you are interested, or you know people who would like to come to San Diego and be there to work on improving the communication with their teams, or also get a better understanding of how neurodivergent minds work, because they are literally wired differently, then either send me a message, or in this case, just go to Instagram, Lady Lexi Speaks Up, or leave comments so I know to reach out to you and what we can do. So Instagram is kind of anonymous, which is nice. Not everyone has to see it, so you can actually message me. So go to Lady Lexi Speaks Up. And for the somewhat older generations, they usually still use Facebook. So go to Lady Lexi on Facebook, and you'll find me. I think you either need to type Lady Lexi Speaks Up or Lady Lexi's Live on the Road. But Lady Lexi is the one. So just find me. Next week, I think will be on my website, and there will be more for you to check out. But for now, please think about all the things that I said and look at your own organization and just see what of these things you can actually use to improve things with your team. And if you are the team and you want to improve things with your manager, then, have them watch this, or have them watch a snippet where I talk about things that you are like, this is what they need to know. Because only when we get together and get to understand one another, that's when we all can thrive. So remember to write down what's one thing that went good, why, what's one thing that needs improving, what are you going to do, and what action are you going to take. Maybe I'll see you in San Diego, and you'll be at the forefront of changing things for the young ones out there, specifically the neurodivergent young ones, because they are a little different. But to change things and really, they have their unique skills. Let them blossom. Let them thrive. That's all we want from people, right? We all want them to be happy. I want you to be happy, but we also want others to be happy. So if we can do it by giving them a little bit more of attention, what's the harm in that? Okay, I'll see you again next week. Remember, leave a comment.